A month after my mother's funeral, she asked for some space, packed my bags, and told me to leave. She forgot who paid the mortgage. She said I was distant because I spent too much time with my sick mother. A month after the funeral, she asked for some space, packed my bags, and told me to leave. She forgot who paid the mortgage. Before I share my story, I'd love for you to comment where you're watching from, so I can get to know you better. And if you subscribe to the channel, you'll receive more inspiring stories like this one. The weight of grief still pressed heavily on my shoulders as I opened the front door to our Victorian-style home on Maple Street. For 18 months, I had spent every free moment at my mother's side, watching cancer slowly claim her body, but never her spirit. Now, 1 month after laying her to rest, all I wanted was the comfort of familiar walls and my wife's embrace. "Sarah," I called out, setting my keys in the ceramic dish by the door. The one Mom had given us as a housewarming gift when we bought this place 10 years ago. The memory stung. The house felt different somehow, colder. The living room lights were dimmed, and there was Sarah sitting rigidly on our leather sofa, hands folded tightly in her lap. "We need to talk, Elliot." Her voice held no warmth, no trace of the woman who had once promised to stand by me through sickness and health, mine or my family's. I sank into the armchair across from her, exhaustion seeping into my bones. At 49, I felt 20 years older. "What's wrong? This isn't working anymore." She wouldn't meet my eyes. "You've been distant." A hollow laugh escaped my lips before I could stop it. "Distant? Sarah, my mother was dying." "It's been more than that," she said, her voice hardening. "Even before your mother got sick. You're always working, always worried about something. Then your mother's illness just gave you more reason to be away." I stared at her, disbelief washing over me. Had she really just reduced my mother's cancer battle to an inconvenience in our marriage? "I think we need some space," she continued, as if discussing a minor change in dinner plans. "Some time apart." "Time apart," I repeated, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "My mother just died, Sarah." "It's been a month, Elliot." She said it like I was being unreasonable. "Life goes on. Life goes on." Such a heartless thing to say to someone still drowning in grief. I didn't recognize the woman sitting before me. This couldn't be the same Sarah who had held my hand at the hospital when Mom was first diagnosed, who had promised we would get through it together. "I've been thinking about this for a while," she added, finally looking up. Something in her eyes, determination perhaps, or relief, sent a chill through me. "How long is a while?" I asked, dread building in my chest. She shrugged. "A few months." So even while I was spending nights in hospital rooms, watching my mother wither away, Sarah had been planning her exit. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. "I've packed some of your things," she said, gesturing toward the hallway where 2 suitcases stood waiting. She'd prepared for this moment, rehearsed it perhaps. "You're kicking me out?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Of my own house?" "I think it's best if you stay somewhere else for now. Give us both some breathing room." Something cold and hard settled in my stomach. "Sarah, whose name is on the mortgage?" She blinked, momentarily thrown. "That's hardly the point. I paid for this house," I said quietly. "Every penny of the down payment came from my savings. I make the mortgage payments every month." Her expression shifted, a flicker of calculation behind her eyes. "It's our house, Elliot. We're married. Were you thinking about that when you packed my bags? When you decided to throw me out a month after burying my mother?" Sarah stood abruptly. "You're being dramatic. This is just temporary until we figure things out." I remained seated, suddenly aware of how calculated this all was. "How temporary?" "I don't know." She crossed her arms. "However long it takes." I looked around the living room, at the photographs on the wall, the furniture we'd chosen together, the life we'd built, or rather the life I thought we'd built. "You realize I just lost the most important person in my life," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "And now you're asking me to leave my home too?" "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," she replied, her tone clipped. "I've already called Martin. He said you can stay with him for a while." Martin, my oldest friend. So she'd involved him in this scheme too. I rose slowly to my feet, a strange calm replacing my initial shock. "You've thought of everything, haven't you?" She didn't answer, just glanced meaningfully at the suitcases by the door. As I picked up my bags, so light for containing what remained of my life, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity. She had forgotten who I was, who we were, and most importantly, she had forgotten who paid the mortgage on the house she was so casually claiming as her own. Martin's guest room felt like a hotel, impersonal and temporary. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the blank wall, my 2 suitcases still unpacked beside me. 3 days had passed since Sarah had asked me to leave our home. 3 days of numbness punctuated by waves of disbelief. "You still sitting in the dark?" Martin appeared in the doorway, his broad frame blocking the hallway light. He flipped the switch, flooding the room with harsh brightness that made me wince. "I'm fine," I said automatically, the same response I'd been giving to everyone since Mom's diagnosis. Martin snorted. "Sure you are." He handed me a beer and sat down beside me, the mattress dipping under his weight. "You want to talk about it yet?" I took a long swig, grateful for the cold bitterness sliding down my throat. "What's there to talk about? My wife threw me out of my own house a month after I buried my mother." "Sarah called Beth again today," Martin said, referring to his wife. "Says you're not returning her messages." "What messages?" I pulled out my phone, showing him the screen. 3 texts in 3 days, all about practical things. When I can pick up more clothes, whether I'll still deposit my paycheck in our joint account. I laughed, but it sounded hollow even to my own ears. Not exactly desperate attempts to reach me. Martin sighed. "She's telling people you 2 agreed to take a break. Says you've been emotionally absent for years, that your mum's illness just made it worse." Something sharp and cold settled in my chest. "She's getting ahead of the narrative." "What do you mean?" "She's making sure everyone knows her version first. That way, when the truth comes out, people will already be inclined to believe her." I'd seen Sarah do this in other situations, with friends, with colleagues. I just never thought she'd do it to me. "So what is the truth?" Martin asked quietly. I stared at my beer bottle, watching condensation drip down the brown glass. "The truth is, I spent the last 1.5 years watching my mother die by inches. I held her hand through chemo, cleaned up when she was sick, sat with her when she couldn't sleep because the pain was too bad." My voice cracked. "And yes, maybe I wasn't emotionally available to Sarah during that time. Maybe I didn't have anything left to give her. But she knew what I was going through." "And now she's acting like you abandoned her," Martin finished. "Exactly." I stood up, suddenly unable to sit still. "You know what the worst part is? When Mum first got sick, Sarah promised we'd face it together. She said, 'I'm here for both of you, Elliot.' But she visited the hospital exactly 3 times in 18 months. 3 times. Martin was quiet for a moment. "Have you checked your email today?" I frowned at the sudden change of subject. "No, why?" He pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, then handed it to me. It was an email from our mutual friend Diane, sent to a group that included most of our social circle. "Hey everyone, Sarah mentioned she and Elliot are going through a rough patch and could use some space. Let's be respectful and give them room to figure things out. Dinner at our place is still on for Saturday. Sarah will be there, but let's not bring up Elliot unless she does first." I handed the phone back, a bitter taste filling my mouth that had nothing to do with the beer. "So that's how it's going to be?" "Not everyone will believe her version," Martin said, but we both knew he was being optimistic. Sarah was charismatic, well-liked. She'd always been the social one in our relationship, the one who organized gatherings, remembered birthdays, sent thoughtful gifts. I was quieter, more reserved, traits that could easily be reframed as distant or emotionally unavailable. My phone buzzed with a text. "Sarah again. Need to stop by tomorrow to get more of your winter clothes. Your suits are taking up too much closet space. Also, the quarterly property tax payment is due next week. Will you be handling that as usual?" "No. How are you?" No acknowledgement of what she'd done. Just practical matters, as if I were a business associate rather than her husband of 15 years. I showed Martin the text. "See what I mean? She kicks me out, then expects me to keep paying for the house I'm not allowed to live in. You should talk to a lawyer," he said, his expression serious. "I'm not ready for that," I admitted. "It still doesn't feel real." "Elliot," Listen to me. Martin placed a hand on my shoulder. I've known you both for years. I love Sarah, you know that. But what she's doing right now, cutting you out of your own home, spinning the story to make you the bad guy, it's calculated. You need to protect yourself. I wanted to argue, to defend the woman I'd loved for so long, but the evidence was stacking up against her. The timing of her decision, the way she'd already packed my bags, how quickly she was reshaping our shared narrative. There's something else, I said slowly, a realization dawning. I need to go back to the house tomorrow. There are some financial documents in my desk drawer that I should get. Want me to come with you? Martin offered. I shook my head. No, I need to do this myself. I needed to look Sarah in the eye to see if the woman I married was still in there somewhere, or if she'd been replaced by this cold, calculating stranger. That night I dreamed of Mom. She was healthy again, sitting at her kitchen table, that knowing look in her eyes. She's not who you thought she was, Elliot, Dream Mom said, stirring her tea. You need to look harder. I woke up at 3 a.m. drenched in sweat, with a single thought burning in my mind. What else had Sarah been hiding while I was caring for my dying mother? The house looked exactly the same as I'd left it 4 days ago, yet somehow felt entirely different. I used my key, still had that at least, and stepped inside cautiously, as if entering a stranger's home. Sarah? I called out. No answer. Her car wasn't in the driveway, but I'd texted to let her know I was coming. I moved through the familiar rooms feeling like a ghost. Family photos still lined the hallway, Sarah and me in Santorini on our 10th anniversary, arms wrapped around each other, grinning at the camera. Had her smile been genuine then? Or was she already planning her exit? In our bedroom, her bedroom now, I supposed, I noticed subtle changes. My nightstand had been cleared, my books removed from the shelf. Small erasures of my existence, methodical and deliberate. I headed for the Home Office where my desk held important documents. As I pulled open the drawer, something caught my eye. Sarah's cell phone, left on the desk. A notification lit up the screen, a text message preview visible. Jason, miss you already. How much longer until... The rest was cut off. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my ears. Jason. The only Jason I knew was Jason Miller, Sarah's colleague from the accounting firm. They'd worked together for 3 years. Had it been going on that long? Without thinking, I picked up the phone. It opened without a passcode. Sarah never bothered with security, always joking that she had nothing to hide. The irony felt like a slap. The full message read, "Miss you already. How much longer until he figures it out? Or are you going to tell him?" I scrolled up through the conversation, each message hitting me like a physical blow. Sarah, it's done. I asked him to leave. He took it surprisingly well. Jason, what did you tell him? Sarah, that he's been distant, used his mother's illness as the reason. He didn't even argue. Jason, did you mention me? Sarah, God, no, I'm not stupid. Just said we needed space. Jason, good. Don't want to complicate the divorce. Divorce. The word seared itself into my brain. So that was the end game. I kept scrolling, unable to stop myself, watching months of betrayal unfold in reverse. Sarah, he's at the hospital again. Free tonight? Jason, your place or mine? Sarah, mine. Elliot won't be home until late. His mother had another bad reaction to the chemo. I felt physically ill. While I'd been holding my mother's hair back as she vomited from the chemotherapy, my wife had been entertaining her lover in our bed. I set the phone down, hands shaking. The documents I'd come for suddenly seemed irrelevant. I needed air, needed to think. As I turned to leave, I heard the front door open. Sarah's voice drifted in, light and casual. I'm just grabbing lunch. I'll be back in an hour. Then she saw me, and the smile slid from her face like melting wax. Elliot, I didn't know you'd be here already. I stared at her, this woman I'd shared 15 years with, searching for any trace of the person I thought I knew. Who's Jason? I asked quietly. Her face went blank, then hardened. Not surprise, not guilt, just calculation. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't. My voice was steady, calmer than I felt. I saw the text, Sarah. She glanced at her phone on the desk, and something shifted in her expression. "You went through my phone. That's a violation of my privacy." The audacity of her response stunned me. "A violation? You've been having an affair while I was caring for my dying mother, and you want to talk about violations?" Sarah's posture changed, arms crossing defensively. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like? Explain it to me, Sarah. Help me understand how you could do this." She sighed as if I were being unreasonable. "We grew apart, Elliot. These things happen." "These things happen," I repeated incredulously. "That's your explanation? What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? Fine, I'm sorry, but we haven't been a real couple for years. Your work, your mother, there was always something more important than me." I stared at her, unable to recognize the woman before me. "My mother was dying, Sarah. She wasn't a hobby I was choosing over date night." "It was never just about your mother," she said, her voice hardening. "You've always been emotionally unavailable. Jason understands me in ways you never tried to." The cruelty of her words left me speechless. In her narrative, my devotion to my dying mother had become a character flaw, a justification for her betrayal. "How long?" I finally asked. She shrugged, the gesture so casual it hurt. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." Sarah looked away. "About a year." A year. While I'd been shuttling between work and the hospital, trying to keep my head above water, my wife had been building a new life with someone else. "I want you out of the house by the end of the week," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. Sarah laughed, short and sharp. "You can't just kick me out, Elliot. I live here too." "Actually, I can. The house is in my name. I paid the down payment with my inheritance. I make the mortgage payments. Legally, it's my house." Her expression changed, shock giving way to something uglier. "We're married. What's yours is mine." "We'll let the courts decide that," I said, reaching for the documents I'd come for. "In the meantime, I'm moving back in. You can stay with Jason." "You wouldn't dare," she hissed, but I saw the first flicker of doubt in her eyes. "Watch me." I tucked the papers under my arm and walked past her, my step lighter than it had been in months. "If you do this," she called after me, "I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are." I turned at the door, meeting her gaze one last time. "Go ahead. I'm not the one who has something to hide." I didn't move back into the house immediately. Despite my confident words to Sarah, I needed time to think, to plan. The confrontation had left me shaken, but strangely liberated. The fog of grief and confusion that had surrounded me since my mother's death was beginning to lift, replaced by a cold clarity. Martin helped me find a lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Diane Reeves, who specialized in divorce cases. She listened to my story without interruption, taking occasional notes. "Your wife's having an affair while you were caring for your terminally ill mother," she summarized when I finished. "And she tried to kick you out of a house that you've been solely responsible for financially." "That's about the size of it," I confirmed. Diane leaned back in her chair. "Mr. Wilson, I've been practicing family law for 25 years. I've seen all kinds of cruel behavior, but this—" She shook her head. "What do you want out of this exactly?" I considered the question. "I want my house. Beyond that, I just want it over with as quickly and cleanly as possible." "And what do you expect your wife to want?" "Everything," I said without hesitation. "Sarah won't go down without a fight." Diane nodded, unsurprised. "They rarely do. I'll draw up the paperwork, but brace yourself, this could get ugly." After leaving her office, I drove aimlessly through the suburbs, not ready to return to Martin's guest room. I found myself in my old neighborhood, drawn there by habit or nostalgia or some masochistic impulse. Instead of turning onto my street, I pulled up outside Mrs. Patel's small bungalow 2 blocks away. Mrs. Patel had been my mother's closest friend for over 30 years. They'd taught at the same elementary school, shared a love of gardening, and stood by each other through life's hardships, my father's early death, Mr. Patel's battle with Parkinson's. During Mom's illness, Mrs. Patel had been a constant presence, bringing homemade meals, sitting with Mom so I could get a few hours of sleep, never complaining, never asking for anything in return. I hadn't seen her since the funeral. The shame of that neglect settled heavily on my shoulders as I knocked on her door. She opened it, wearing a bright floral apron, grey hair pulled back in her usual neat bun. Her face lit up with surprise and genuine pleasure. "Elliot, what a wonderful surprise!" She pulled me into a hug, her small frame still remarkably strong. Come in, I just made chai." Her home smelled of cardamom and cinnamon, warm and inviting. Photos covered every surface, her children, grandchildren, and several of my mother, including one of Mom and me at my college graduation. "How have you been, Beta?" she asked, using the affectionate term she'd called me since childhood. "I've been worried about you." The simple kindness in her voice nearly undid me. "Not great," I admitted, accepting the steaming mug she pressed into my hands. "Sarah and we're separating." Mrs. Patel's expression didn't change. She simply nodded, as if confirming something she already suspected. "I see. You don't seem surprised." She sighed, settling into her armchair. "Your mother had concerns." This was news to me. "About Sarah?" "Mum never said anything." "Of course she didn't. She wouldn't want to hurt you, especially when she was already asking so much of you during her illness." Mrs. Patel took a careful sip of her chai. "But she saw things, noticed things." "Like what?" "Like how rarely Sarah visited her, how she always had excuses, the way she looked at you when you weren't watching, impatient, distant." She shook her head. "Priya was very observant, your mother. I absorbed this information slowly, painfully. Why didn't Mom say something? What good would it have done? You were already carrying so much weight." Mrs. Patel's dark eyes were kind but direct, and perhaps she hoped she was wrong. I stared into my chai, watching the spices swirl in the milky liquid. She wasn't wrong. Sarah's been having an affair. Probably started around the time Mom got sick. Mrs. Patel made a soft sound of disapproval, but didn't seem shocked. "And now what will you do? Fight for my house, file for divorce, try to rebuild my life somehow?" Even saying the words out loud made the task seem impossibly daunting. "Do you know what your mother told me the week before she passed?" Mrs. Patel asked suddenly. I shook my head. "She said, 'My only regret is that I won't be here to see Elliot become the man he's meant to be.' She believed in your strength, even when you couldn't see it yourself." Tears pricked at my eyes. I'd been so focused on Mom's physical suffering that I'd missed the wisdom she was still trying to impart. "I don't feel very strong right now," I admitted. Mrs. Patel leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "Then let me give you the advice Priya would have given. Document everything, but act with dignity. Let her expose herself." "What do you mean?" "I mean people like your wife. They expect anger. They expect scenes and drama because it confirms their narrative that you're the problem." She smiled slightly. "Disappoint her. Be calm. Be reasonable. Be so unfailingly decent that her lies become obvious to everyone." I considered this, turning the strategy over in my mind. It wasn't about revenge or winning in the court of public opinion. It was about preserving my own integrity while allowing Sarah's actions to speak for themselves. "There's one more thing," I said, setting down my mug. "I found financial documents I didn't recognize. Transfers to accounts I don't know about. I think Sarah's been moving money." Mrs. Patel nodded, unsurprised again. "Then you add that to what you document. But you don't confront until you're ready, until you have everything in order." She reached across and patted my hand. "Your mother taught you patience, Elliot. Use it now." As I drove back to Martin's place that evening, I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. The betrayal still hurt, a deep, throbbing wound that wouldn't heal quickly, but the confusion was gone. I knew what I needed to do. Sarah wanted a war. She expected me to fight dirty, to match her deceptions with my own. Instead, I would take Mrs. Patel's advice, my mother's advice, really. I would document everything, the affair, the financial deceptions, the attempts to manipulate our friends. And then I would wait, allowing Sarah to reveal her true character to the world while I preserved mine. For the first time since my mother's diagnosis, I felt something like hope. Not happiness, not yet, but the faint promise that someday it might be possible again. For 6 weeks I followed Mrs. Patel's advice with meticulous care. I documented everything, screenshots of text messages between Sarah and Jason, records of suspicious financial transfers, emails with her increasingly desperate attempts to control the narrative among our friends. I didn't move back into the house, not yet. Instead, I rented a small apartment downtown, close to my office. I needed neutral ground, a space untainted by betrayal, where I could plan my next steps. Sarah's behavior grew more erratic as weeks passed. When calm intimidation failed, she tried tearful reconciliation, showing up at my office one Tuesday afternoon with red-rimmed eyes. "Can we talk?" she asked, standing in my doorway looking appropriately contrite in a modest blue dress I recognized. She'd worn it to Mom's funeral. "About what?" I kept my voice neutral, neither hostile nor welcoming. "About us." She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, Elliot. Maybe I was too hasty." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Have a seat." She did, smoothing her skirt with practiced grace. "I miss you," she said, her voice soft. "The house feels empty without you." I didn't respond, just watched her performance with detached interest. "What happened with Jason?" she continued, dropping her eyes in rehearsed shame. "It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. I was lonely, and he was there, but it didn't mean anything." "A year-long affair doesn't sound like a meaningless mistake," I observed mildly. Her eyes flashed with momentary irritation before she regained control. "I was confused, Elliot. Your mother's illness, the way you shut me out—" "Don't." My voice remained calm, but the word landed like a slap. "Don't use my mother's cancer as an excuse for your choices." Sarah shifted strategies smoothly. "You're right. That was wrong of me." A tear slid down her cheek, perfectly timed. "I just want another chance to make things right." "Why?" I asked simply. The question seemed to throw her. "What do you mean, why? Because I love you." "Do you?" I leaned forward, studying her face. "Or is it because Jason ended things?" Her carefully constructed mask slipped, shock registering briefly before she recovered. "I don't know what you're talking about." I opened a folder on my desk, removing a printed email. "This is from Jason to you, dated 2 weeks ago. Sarah, this isn't working. The situation with the house is more complicated than you led me to believe. I can't keep doing this." I set the paper down. "Interesting timing, your sudden desire to reconcile." Sarah's face hardened. "You've been spying on me?" "No, just paying attention." I closed the folder. "The thing is, Sarah, I don't think you want me back. I think you want the house, the financial security, the lifestyle. And now that Jason's gotten cold feet, I'm your fallback plan." She stood abruptly. "You've changed." "Yes," I agreed. "I have." "This isn't over," she warned, reaching for the door. "Actually, it is." I handed her another document. "Divorce papers. My lawyer had them prepared. You'll find the terms are fair, more than fair, considering the circumstances." Sarah glanced at the document, her face paling. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious in my life." I stood, indicating our conversation was finished. "You have 48 hours to move out of the house. After that, the locks will be changed. You can't just throw me out." "Actually, I can." "That's my house, Sarah. The mortgage is in my name only. We've been through this already." "I'll fight you," she hissed, abandoning all pretense of contrition. "I'll make sure everyone knows what a cold, heartless bastard you really are." I smiled, genuinely amused by her desperation. "You're welcome to try." After she stormed out, I sat back in my chair, exhaling slowly. The confrontation had gone exactly as I'd expected. Sarah had tried manipulation, then guilt, then threats, her usual playbook. But for the first time, I'd seen through every tactic. That evening, I called Martin to update him. "How did she take it?" he asked. "About as well as you'd expect." I was parked outside my house, watching Sarah through the window as she paced back and forth on the phone. "She'll try to rally support, paint me as the villain." "It's already started," Martin confirmed. "Beth got a call from her an hour ago. Full waterworks claiming you ambushed her with divorce papers out of nowhere, that you've been cold and calculating." I laughed softly. "And what did Beth say?" "That's the interesting part. Beth told her she knew about Jason." That everyone knows. I hadn't expected that. Everyone? Small community, big mouths. Jason's wife found out weeks ago, filed for divorce herself. She hasn't been quiet about it. Sarah's affair isn't exactly a secret anymore. A weight I hadn't realized I was carrying suddenly lifted. I wouldn't have to defend myself to explain my side of the story. The truth was already out there. There's something else, Martin added. Sarah's been calling around trying to find a place to stay. Apparently Jason's not offering his spare room. Let me guess. She's hoping for sympathy lodging. Yeah, but she's not finding many takers. People are, well, they're disgusted, Elliot. The timing of it all, while your mother was dying, it's left a bad taste. I watched as Sarah continued her agitated phone conversation, gesturing wildly. I don't take pleasure in her downfall, I said, surprising myself with the realization that it was true. I just want what's rightfully mine and the freedom to move on. You'll get it, Martin assured me. Sarah overplayed her hand. Even her closest friends are backing away. 2 days later, I returned to the house with a locksmith. Sarah was gone, along with her clothes and personal items. She'd taken some furniture too, the guest room bed, her grandmother's antique dresser, various decorative pieces. I didn't care. Objects could be replaced. What couldn't be replaced was my sense of self, my dignity, my right to grieve my mother's death without the added burden of betrayal and manipulation. As I walked through the empty rooms, I felt no triumph, no vindication, just a quiet certainty that I was reclaiming not just my house, but my life. That night I slept in my own bed for the first time in nearly 2 months. The silence was absolute, peaceful. No one was scrutinizing my grief, measuring my emotional availability, finding me wanting. I could just be flawed, still mourning, but healing. For the first time since my mother's death, I didn't dream at all. 2 years can change everything, or perhaps it's more accurate to say that 2 years can reveal everything. Who you really are, what truly matters, which bridges are worth rebuilding and which are better left in ashes. The divorce was finalized 18 months ago. Sarah fought until the end, but the evidence was too overwhelming. The affair, the financial manipulations, the attempts to alienate our friends. In the end, she received a settlement that was generous by legal standards, if not by her expectations. The house remained mine, along with my retirement accounts and investments. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she moved to Phoenix with a new boyfriend 6 months after the divorce. Jason was long gone, having reconciled with his wife in a plot twist that surprised everyone except me. Sarah had always been a temporary diversion for him. I understood that now. What I couldn't understand, would probably never understand, was how easily I had been discarded after 15 years of marriage. But that was Sarah's burden to carry, not mine. On a crisp autumn morning, much like the day of my mother's funeral 2 years earlier, I stood in my backyard surveying the changes I'd made. The once neglected garden was now thriving, dahlias, chrysanthemums and asters blooming in a riot of color. Mom had always loved fall flowers. "This looks incredible," said a warm voice behind me. "Your mother would be proud." I turned to see Mrs. Patel making her way carefully down the garden path, a covered dish in her hands. At 76, she moved more slowly these days, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. "You think so?" I took the dish from her, catching the scent of cardamom and cinnamon, her famous rice pudding. "I know so." She patted my arm affectionately. "Priya always said you had her green thumb, if only you'd use it." We settled on the patio furniture, enjoying the gentle sunlight. From inside the house came the sounds of voices and laughter, Martin and Beth, their children, and a handful of other friends who had stood by me through the darkest days. "So," Mrs. Patel said, sipping her tea, "today's the day?" I nodded, a mixture of emotions tightening my chest. "The foundation launches officially this afternoon. All the paperwork is finally in place." The Priya Wilson Memorial Foundation had been my obsession for the past year, a support network for family caregivers of cancer patients, offering everything from respite care to financial assistance to emotional counseling. The idea had come to me during those long, lonely nights after Sarah left, when I realized how many others must be facing similar battles without support. She would have loved this, you know, Mrs. Patel said softly. Not just the foundation, but seeing you now. Stronger, wiser, more yourself than you've ever been. I smiled, knowing she was right. The man I'd become in these 2 years was someone my mother would recognize, someone who honored her legacy of kindness and strength, who had learned to set boundaries without building walls. Have you heard from Sarah? Mrs. Patel asked, always direct. An email last month. She's engaged again. Wanted to make sure I knew. I shrugged. I wished her well and meant it. Mrs. Patel nodded approvingly. That's growth, Beta, real growth. The back door opened and Martin stuck his head out. Hey, the caterers are here. Want to come deal with them or should I? I've got it, I said, standing. Mrs. Patel, make yourself comfortable. I'll just be a minute. As I moved through my home, truly mine now in every sense, I passed the dining room where friends were setting up for the foundation's launch party. The large table was covered with photographs of Mom at various stages of her life, smiling, vibrant, real. In the front hallway, a young woman was directing caterers where to set up the food. She turned as I approached, her smile brightening. There you are, the florist called. They're running about 15 minutes late, but everything else is on schedule. Thanks, Emma, I said, returning her smile. Emma Chen had entered my life 6 months ago as the Foundation's first employee, a social worker with experience in oncology support services. She was brilliant, compassionate, and completely unimpressed by my occasional bouts of self-pity. We worked well together, our professional relationship gradually warming into friendship and recently into something more. Nervous? She asked, stepping closer. A little, I admitted. There's been a long road to get here. Her hand found mine, squeezing gently. Worth every step, though. What you're creating will help so many people, Elliot. I nodded, throat suddenly tight with emotion. Mom would have liked you, I said quietly. I wish I could have met her. Emma's dark eyes were soft with understanding. But I feel like I know her through you, through all of this. She gestured to the foundation materials spread across the hallway table, brochures, pamphlets, business cards, all bearing my mother's name. Martin appeared from the kitchen, grinning widely. If you two are done making heart eyes at each other, people are starting to arrive. Emma laughed, releasing my hand, but not before giving me a look that promised we'd continue this conversation later. She moved off to greet the first guests, efficiency and warmth radiating from her every movement. Martin watched her go, then turned to me with a raised eyebrow. So, things are getting serious there, huh? Maybe, I allowed, feeling a faint heat in my cheeks. We're taking it slow. Good for you, he clapped my shoulder. Seriously, Elliot, I'm happy for you. As more guests arrived, former colleagues of my mother's, oncology nurses from her treatment center, friends old and new, I found myself standing back, watching the room fill with people who had come to honor her memory and support the foundation created in her name. 2 years ago, I'd been drowning in grief, blindsided by betrayal, unsure of my place in the world. Now I stood in the home I'd fought for, surrounded by people who truly cared, launching a foundation that would help others navigate the same painful journey I'd traveled. I hadn't just survived, I had rebuilt, not perfectly, not without scars, but with an authenticity and purpose that would have made my mother proud. Mrs. Patel appeared at my side, her small hand slipping into mine. She sees you, you know, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Wherever Priya is now, she sees what you've become. I squeezed her hand gently. I like to think so. Across the room, Emma caught my eye and smiled, a private, intimate smile that sent warmth spreading through my chest. It wasn't the same kind of love I'd known before. It was wiser, more grounded, built on mutual respect rather than need or obligation. I thought of Sarah briefly, wondering if she'd found what she was looking for in Phoenix. I hoped so with a sincerity that surprised me. The anger had faded, leaving only a distant sadness for what could have been, should have been, but never really was. In the end, Sarah hadn't just forgotten who paid the mortgage. She'd forgotten who I was, the man who had stood by his mother, who had honored his commitments even when they demanded everything he had. But in forgetting me, she had inadvertently set me free, and for that, strangely enough, I was grateful.